Last time, on Battle Angel Alita, Alita started to get closer to the scavenger Yugo, unaware of the shady dealings he engages in on his quest to reach the floating city, Zalem. Tragically, the hunter-warrior Zapan enacted his grudge with Alita by killing Yugo's friends and reporting his crimes. Yugo barely escaped, and now Alita is confronted with the fact that he's a fugitive with a bounty on his head. Let's see how she'll hunt him or help him in Fight 10, Yugo on the Run. This is another long chapter, 2 pages longer than the last one at 66 pages, so let's get right into it. We start on a rainy day in the scrapyard. A screen lights up with today's bounty update, showing us Yugo's face. He's a wanted man. That brings us to the chapter art as Alita whips past the screen in the rain, a distressed look on her face. I'm not a huge fan of this art. I get that the action lines here are meant to convey speed and motion through the rain, but there comes a point where it's too much. The longer I look, the more Alita looks like a porcupine with a weird expression. I do like that it integrates into the events of the story instead of being a one-off image. Moving on, Alita is thinking to herself that she has to find Yugo, but she stumbles and falls. In fact, she's moving so fast that she bounces and skids down the street, smashes into a wrecked car, and gets tossed into the air off a ledge. Alita has a moment of reflection as she tumbles through the air. She wonders, just what is she supposed to do when she finds Yugo? She's not going to kill him and take his head for the bounty, she rules that out pretty quick. As she careens, Alita wonders if she will protect him from other hunter-warriors. By the time she bounces off a few wrecked cars and lands in a deep puddle, she's resolved to do just that, even if Ito is furious with her. That seems the least of the consequences, but as much as I like this bit of hardening resolve, this whole segment is kind of funny to me. She's going through what is essentially a high-speed car accident without a car, and Alita is so unfazed by getting knocked around like this, it doesn't even interrupt her internal monologue. One could say it shows the strength of her resolve, despite the emotional curveball she's been thrown, and the berserker body is just that powerful. After this, we go through some scenes very quickly. Over in the slums where Yugo lives, a factory drone is distributing Yugo's bounty info, telling passers-by to report information to the factory. As Alita picks up one of these printouts, the drone reiterates that the bounty system is really a sort of debugging process for the factory to ensure smooth operations in the scrapyard. It isn't a system of justice, and it doesn't exist to protect the residents of the scrapyard. On that depressing note, Alita looks at the broken down door of Yugo's shack and has an idea of where he might be. Over back at the factory, Zapan asks Ito to wager on what Alita will do, indicating that he thinks Alita will find and run away with Yugo, though he wants to torment her even more. Ito is disgusted by Zapan, who stops him from leaving. After a scuffle, Zapan manages to knock Ito out with a blow to the head, I guess. It's a bit hard to tell from the panel. Zapan says Ito is the last piece of his trap. Now we go to a warehouse in the middle of the current rainstorm, which is getting pretty torrential. This is presumably the same place Alita met Yugo for the first time, and he's there now. Inside, Yugo is counting his chips, noting that he's got 9.5 out of the 10 million he needs. Suddenly, he hears someone, and it's Alita, looking like a drowned rat. She shows him his bounty paper and asks if he really did the things he's accused of, namely assaults and spinal column theft. Yugo rather flippantly admits that he did, many times. He even jokes about his bounty being cheap. He did it all to raise his funds for going to Zalem. Alita suggests that's all for nothing now, since he'll have to leave town and take off for some far-off location, But Yugo says he's going back to town to see Vector. He still hasn't given up on getting to Zalem. Yugo explains that Zalem itself isn't so special to him, he just wants to get out of the scrapyard. But it also seems to be a bit more emotional, as he likens his struggle to a battle between him and the scrapyard. As Yugo sees it, the people of the scrapyard have been trying to tear down his pride and dream of going to Zalem. Standing by his dream, even if it's stupid, and refusing to be ground down to human scrap like everyone else, is what makes him his own man, and so he'll keep pursuing it as long as he can. Honestly, Yugo is not my favorite character by any means, but this scene makes me think he could be a protagonist of his own story. His man with a dream against the world attitude would make him fit in with a lot of shonen protagonists, if he could actually fight. That's part of the tragedy of Yugo, but I'll get more into that when discussing this arc as a whole. I do find it weird that Alita isn't taking more issue with all the assaults and spinal theft, but she just breezes right past that. Yugo tells Alita to go home before she gets dragged into this, which makes Alita realize this might be her last opportunity to confess her feelings. She's very direct about it actually, saying to Yugo that she really likes him and asking him how he feels about her. After her beating around the bush for so long, I like that she's just being straightforward about it now. He seems surprised by this, and Alita immediately slips into a fervor of anxiety, wondering what she should do if he doesn't give the answer she wants. She considers whether she'd still become a bounty target for him. Even if she did, she could still end up killing him by accident. This pulling on the anxieties about her powerful cyborg body from the previous chapter. Alita resolves that if she does kill Yugo, she'll break open her own skull and kill herself. That's a bit extreme, but she's caught up in the emotion of the moment. She's seemingly dedicated herself to protecting Yugo regardless if he returns her feelings. Yugo starts to laugh off her nonsense question and tells her to go home. But Alita slams her hand against the wall beside his head and demands an answer. He needs to be very careful with his next words. Instead of being scared though, he's prompted to think that he's been so busy looking up at Zalem, he never noticed how beautiful Alita's eyes are. I guess it takes threats before he's able to notice her. So after a moment, he says that they're accomplices, and she kisses him. Aw, ain't that cute. A love-struck couple on the run. I'm sure this won't end in tragedy. They have a short discussion about how kissing Alita was kind of like licking a battery, since her body recharges on stormy days like this. That kinda leeches the romance right out of the atmosphere, but okay. This is just a jumping off point for Alita to ask Yugo about the scar on his wrist, so that he can elaborate on his backstory. Like I said at the beginning, this is a long chapter, so I'm going to try and speed through this part. Yugo had a much older brother, who along with his wife raised Yugo like parents. His brother was an engineer for the factory, very smart and very daring. He wondered about Zalem, who built it and the factories and why. Nobody from the scrapyard really knows. That history is lost. They're all just cogs in a machine they don't understand. Yugo's brother wants to understand though. He theorizes that Zalem is actually hanging from the shaft, rising from it into the atmosphere. A similar city likely sits at the top of the shaft in orbit. The centrifugal force and the Earth's gravity cancel each other out, allowing both cities to remain in place. I'm not a physicist, so I can't say how well this checks out, but it seems plausible and shows that Yugo's brother was a pretty smart guy. He eventually came to the idea of creating a hot air balloon big enough for one person, so that he could go up and see Zalem up close. He began building it in the very abandoned warehouse that Yugo and Alita are in now. This worried his wife, as creating and using flying machines is against the law. Yugo overheard them arguing about it, surmising that she was scared of throwing caution to the wind and going on an adventure. When Yugo was 10 years old, the balloon was finished, but the day the trip was planned, his brother's wife asked Yugo to go to town for an errand. Yugo thought this was strange, but did as she asked. When he returned, it was dark, and Yugo found his brother's machines in flames, a hunter-warrior holding his severed head. His wife tried to raise Yugo on her own, but Yugo had realized that she was responsible for this. She had sold out his brother to a hunter-warrior. Yugo ran away from home and started living on the streets. After 2 years, he ran across a vendor selling replacement hands and recognized his brother's. Yugo offered to trade his own hand for his brother's, which caught the attention of Vector. Vector seemed interested, and apparently kid hands are more valuable, so he orders the trade to go through. Yugo requests to keep the transplant scar as a memento of his brother's dream. The doctor says he should ask Vector if he wants to go to Zalem, since Vector is apparently the only person in the scrapyard that's ever actually been to Zalem. Yugo demands that Vector take him to Zalem, and Vector says that he will, for 10 million chips. After 3 years of odd jobs and spinal column theft, Yugo is just $500,000 away from that goal. Alita asks him whatever happened to his brother's wife, which Yugo doesn't know. Alita empathizes with how she must have felt, with the one she loved so fixated on something so far away. She must have felt jealous. At first, she probably tried her best to share in his vision, but then she fell off, and felt like he was abandoning her and the town. And so, she killed him. Alita says this while staring straight at Yugo with an utterly cold expression on her face. It's actually surprisingly intimidating. Yugo tries to laugh it off and says Alita would have to kill him to stop him from going to Zalem. This prompts Alita to get right up in his face and ponder that maybe she should kill him. I'm not sure if this is a twisted sense of humor on Alita's part, or just her way of expressing her frustration with Yugo. In any case, she drops a bundle of chips into his hand, 650,000 to be exact, more than enough to make up for the chips he still needed. Alita explains that now he can go to Zalem right away. She plans to make sure he gets to Vector safely, and then raise her own money to join Yugo in Zalem later. Yugo is surprised, but doesn't show it. He says he appreciates her gift and goes to answer a call of nature. He has some thinking to do. Outside, the rain is easing up a bit, and Yugo washes his face in a barrel filled with rainwater. He's not comfortable with just running off and leaving. He feels like he has to do something to repay Alita. This is actually some positive character development for Yugo. He's questioning whether he really should be so single-mindedly pursuing his dream. He doesn't have too much time to contemplate that, though, as a figure appears, saying they should have known he would be here. It's the same hunter-warrior that killed his brother, and Yugo barely has time to speak before he strikes. I just want to say I like the build-up to this character. Showing him in the flashback, you could not take too much notice of him. He's got a distinctive design, but you could dismiss him as a random hunter-warrior. But by showing him in the flashback, we know how he came to find Yugo here. He recognized Yugo as the brother of a man whose head he took 5 years ago, and guessed he might hide at this same old warehouse that his brother once used. I just like how all that was done. So anyway, Yugo is down an arm. Specifically, the arm his brother's hand was grafted to, and it looks like he lost a chunk of his torso along with it. His attacker's palm glows with heat as he holds Yugo up for the finishing blow, saying, "Return to substance." A note at the bottom of the page says that this is a reference to substantist thought, an offshoot of Cartesian dualism. As far as a quick Google search will tell me, Cartesian dualism is mostly the idea that mind and body are separate, with the mind being a non-physical substance. Substance dualism holds that the body cannot think, and that the mind can exist outside the body. So this hunter-warrior is expressing the idea that he's just destroying Yugo's body, as opposed to his mind and soul. That's a surprisingly thoughtful notion for a hunter-warrior on the job. I'm intrigued. I'm wondering what more we might learn about this warrior and his philosophy going forward. Alita has heard this racket and launches herself out the side of the building. I do mean the building. It doesn't look like there was a window, she just charged through the wall. She kicks the hunter as she falls in a panel I honestly found a little confusing to decipher. It's an odd leg movement to imagine, but I get the general idea. The hunter is forced back, and he starts complaining about Alita stealing his prize as another hunter-warrior, which is apparently a serious crime. Alita tends to Yugo, though I don't think there's much she can do. His organs are falling out. Accusing Alita of treachery, the hunter attacks with his white-hot palm, which Alita counters with her berserker body's own plasma manipulation abilities, and catches his hand. The hunter mocks her and tries to burn through her hand, but Alita channels an electric shock through her body to his. This doesn't seem to do much, but Alita kicks his hands to disengage. And then a bolt of lightning burns the hunter-warrior to a crisp. So much for potentially compelling philosophical positions. So I guess Alita positively charged the hunter-warrior to attract the lightning. Clever, if a bit of a gamble. There is seriously nothing left of this guy. Alita is concerned about Yugo though, who's still alive but going cold fast. She dramatically screams, "No!" into the rain and laments that she can't share some of her life with him, before realizing there is something she can do to save him. We won't find out just yet though. The next scene has Alita leaping through the city carrying Yugo's body over her shoulder. She says they're going to Vector's place, which is confusing to me considering what we'll find out in a moment. A spotlight shines on her as they are discovered by Zapan. He's got together a bunch of hunter-warriors and a factory drone to corner her, saying there's no escape, and accusing Alita of rebellion against the factory. The drone, Zapan indicates this type of factory drone is called a Netman, announces that if Alita is found to have committed treason, she will be immediately destroyed by anti-hunter warrior missiles, presumably launched from this gun with factory law written on the barrel. To further encourage Alita to hand over Yugo, Zapan reveals his hostage, Ido, trapped above them on an antenna with no way down. Zapan says the only way for Alita to get out of this is to do her duty as a hunter-warrior and cut Yugo's head off. Zapan is really hoping to see her agonize over this, or turn on them and get killed. Instead, Alita unwraps the bundle under her arm and reveals Yugo's severed head. Zapan and Ido are stunned, but the Netman simply announces that the duty has been completed. The other hunter-warriors all start to leave, complaining about how anticlimactic this was. Zapan does not take this well. He leaps down by Alita and demands to know how the hell this happened, and how she could so easily kill a boy she loved. He makes a grab for the head, saying he'll smash it, flinging Yugo's headless body over the edge as he does so. We see that there are tubes connecting Alita's chest to the base of Yugo's head. Zapan realizes that Alita has patched Yugo's head into her own circulatory system, keeping his brain alive. This raises some questions about why Alita was heading to Vector and not Ido's to get Yugo some help. Also, thank goodness Alita and Yugo have compatible blood types, I guess. The Netman, who can't see the connection between Yugo and Alita, I assume, just sees Zapan trying to steal Alita's bounty, and announces that this is a crime under factory law. This means that Alita is legally entitled to retaliate. She strikes him once, pretty much punching his face off along with a chunk of his head. And that is the last page of this long 66-page chapter. So chapter 10 is pretty huge in a lot of ways. Alita is forced to make a choice about what is important to her, and she makes the emotional choice, helping Yugo no matter what the consequences may be. I tend to view a lot of Alita's early stories as being primarily explorations of who Alita is as a character, more than a larger epic story. So what does this chapter say about her character? I suppose that she is able to be swept up in her passions and make impulsive choices, but she does stick to those choices and won't yield to fear. I guess we also get a hint of ingenuity, since she somehow managed to keep Yugo's severed head alive. That part isn't actually that far-fetched, apparently. Scientists have been experimenting with keeping animal heads alive after decapitation since the mid-1800s, with some success. More to the point though, Alita is shown to be someone who fights for her loved ones yet again. But also again, I like that she's not thoughtless about it. She actually considers the consequences of her actions before taking them. Her emotions still seem a bit immature, but she's thought this out. Moving on to Yugo, I actually started liking him a lot more in this chapter. His backstory adds a lot to his characterization. He's portrayed as someone that lives in a world where people with dreams of something better, something beyond the scrapyard, get torn down by the people around them. He refuses to let that happen to him, and he dedicates himself to his dream fully, regardless of how silly or unrealistic it may seem. That's a sort of passion I find admirable, though it does blind him to Alita and his own feelings. Overall, I really liked the twists and turns of this chapter. The reveal of Yugo's head in particular was really cool, and surprising when I first read it. Nothing plays out too conveniently, and Yugo, Alita, and the Hunter Warrior converging on that warehouse was well set up. The Hunter's name is Clive Lee, by the way. His name never came up in the story, and I'm not actually sure where it's revealed, but that's what the internet tells me. With that long eventful chapter done with, be on the lookout for my next chapter video to see what happens to Yugo and Alita next. Until then, I hope you're having a great day.